The wind cut through the Absaroka Range like a blade through bone. February in northern Wyoming didn't ask permission to hurt you. It just did. The kind of cold that turned breath to ice before it left your lungs, that made your teeth ache, that reminded you exactly how small you were against the mountain's indifference. Nathaniel Cordell felt it even through the cracked windshield of his Dodge Ram, the heater barely coughing warm air through vents that hadn't worked properly since 2009. The truck was old. Hell, everything Nate owned was old. The Ram had 187,000 miles on it, rust eating through the wheel wells, a check engine light that had been on so long he'd stopped noticing it. But it ran. That was enough. In the passenger seat, a German shepherd sat perfectly still, amber eyes fixed on the road ahead. Duke. 7 years old, 88 pounds of muscle and scar tissue and training that never quite left even after the army decided he'd given enough. The dog's right ear was torn halfway down a souvenir from Kandahar. A long scar ran down his spine where shrapnel had carved a line through fur and flesh. His left front leg favored slightly the limp only visible when he was tired. Nate knew that limp. Had one of his own. The dashboard clock read 4:47 p.m. 3 hours from Casper to here, 3 hours of watching the world turn white and empty. The radio had given up trying to find a signal 40 minutes ago, leaving nothing but static and the growl of the engine and the whistle of wind through the window seals that didn't quite close anymore. On the dashboard, held down with electrical tape that had gone yellow with age, was a photograph. A young man in army fatigues, dusty, and grinning one arm around the same German shepherd who now sat silent in the passenger seat. Sergeant Garrett Sullivan, 23 years old in that photo. Dead at 36. Nate hadn't known Garrett well. Same unit, different years. 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion. Nate had done his time in Afghanistan from 2009 to 2011, came home with a Purple Heart he kept in a shoebox and a left leg full of metal that set off airport scanners. Garrett had deployed later, stayed longer, made the army his life until his life ended on a 2-lane highway outside of Absaroka 3 weeks ago. Single vehicle accident, the police report said. Icy roads, lost control, rolled 4 times. Dead before the ambulance arrived. Nate didn't believe it for a second. The letter from the lawyer had come 14 days after Garrett's funeral. Standard legal envelope return address from some firm in Sheridan. Inside 2 pages of dense text that boiled down to one impossible sentence. Sergeant Garrett Sullivan had left Nate his property. A cabin. 40 acres. Free and clear. Nate had read that letter 5 times before he believed it was real. He'd never been to Garrett's cabin. Didn't even know the man owned one. The only time they'd spoken was in 2010, in a field hospital outside Kandahar, when Nate had been the combat medic who'd kept pressure on Garrett's femoral artery while waiting for the medevac bird. "You saved my life, Doc," Garrett had said through gritted teeth, his face pale with blood loss. "Just doing my job," Nate had replied. "I'll pay you back someday." 15 years later, apparently he had. The lawyer's letter included a handwritten note paper-clipped to the legal documents. Garrett's handwriting barely legible. "For the medic who saved my life, use it well, G.S." Nate had stared at that note for a long time. Then he'd looked around his trailer, 8 feet wide, 30 feet long, parked in a lot where the owner charged $380 a month and didn't ask questions. He'd looked at the eviction notice taped to his door, bright orange final warning. He'd looked at his bank statement, $340 in checking, $0 in savings, £2, $600 in credit card debt. No health insurance, no prospects. He'd packed everything he owned into 2 duffel bags and a plastic tote. It took 30 minutes. The road narrowed as the elevation climbed. Pines crowded close on both sides, branches heavy with snow that hadn't melted since Thanksgiving. The GPS on Nate's phone had lost signal 20 miles back, but the lawyer had included printed directions. Mile marker 47, turn left onto Forest Service Road 328. Follow 8 miles to gate. The turn came up suddenly, easy to miss. No sign, just a gap in the trees and a road that was more suggestion than pavement. Nate slowed, turned the wheel, felt the Ram's rear end slide slightly on ice before the tires caught. Duke shifted in his seat, ears forward. Alert. "Yeah, I feel it too, boy," Nate said quietly. The forest closed in. This wasn't the kind of place you wandered into by accident. This was the kind of place you came to when you didn't want to be found. The road climbed steeply, switchbacking through terrain that would be impassable once the real snow came. Tree branches scraped the roof of the truck, leaving streaks in the dirt and salt residue. No tire tracks. No footprints. Nothing but white silence pressing in from all sides. Duke's ears swiveled. His body went rigid in that way that meant something had changed, something Nate couldn't see yet, but the dog could sense. Training never left. Not really. You could retire a military working dog, give him a comfortable home, let him sleep on soft beds instead of dirt. But that part of his brain that had been shaped by war and work and the need to detect threats before they became fatal, that part stayed sharp. Nate's hand went to the wheel a little tighter. His eyes scanned the tree line. Old habits. Different war, same instincts. The radio on the dashboard crackled to life, suddenly making both of them jump. Not music. A voice. Emergency broadcast. Automated. Winter storm warning in effect for Absaroka and Bighorn ranges through 6 a.m. Friday. Heavy snow accumulation expected 12 to 18 inches. Wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Travel not recommended. Seek shelter. Static swallowed the rest. Nate looked at the sky. Still light, but barely. The sun was already behind the mountains, leaving only that cold blue twilight that came early this far north in winter. He checked the trip odometer. 6 miles in, 2 to go. The road leveled out into a clearing, and there it was. The cabin sat back from the road about 50 yards, tucked against a stand of pines that formed a natural windbreak. It was larger than Nate had expected, 2 stories, maybe 1,500 square feet, built from logs that had weathered to silver grey. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, but it was intact. Shutters hung crooked on some windows. The porch steps looked like they'd need replacing before spring, but it was solid, real, his. Nate cut the engine. The silence that followed felt heavy, like something watching. Duke didn't move. His eyes were locked on something Nate couldn't see yet, body absolutely still except for the barely visible tension in his shoulders. This wasn't the relaxed alertness of a dog arriving somewhere new. This was the frozen stillness of a dog who'd found something wrong. "What is it?" Nate asked, voice low. Duke's ears flattened. A sound came from his throat so quiet Nate almost missed it. A growl, not aggressive. Warning. Nate opened the door slowly, boots crunching on snow. The cold hit him like a fist. The wind had teeth here, nothing to stop it but mountains and distance. He was wearing flannel over thermal underwear, a canvas work jacket that had seen better years, jeans that were more whole than denim, and work boots with soles that were smooth enough to be dangerous on ice. Duke jumped down beside him, immediately moving to Nate's left side, the position he'd been trained to hold. Heel. Always heel. Even now, years after his service had ended, the command was wired too deep to forget. They stood together in the clearing, man and dog, both of them scanning. The cabin's front door was closed, windows intact. No smoke from the chimney, but Nate hadn't expected any. No other vehicles, no footprints in the snow except the ones they were making now. But something was wrong. Nate felt it the same way Duke smelled it, a wrongness in the air that had no name but demanded attention. "Easy," Nate murmured, more to himself than the dog. He reached into the truck bed, pulled out a Coleman lantern. Battery-powered, the kind that threw a wide beam. The sun was nearly gone now, shadows pooling between the trees like spilled ink. He clicked the lantern on. The beam cut through the gathering dark, sweeping across the cabin's front, the porch. The Duke barked. Sharp. Urgent. The sound a military working dog makes when he's found something. Not the playful bark of a pet, the alert bark of a professional. Nate's heart kicked up. He swung the lantern to where Duke was staring. There was a gate. He hadn't seen it at first in the fading light, a simple wooden arch spanning the path between the road and the cabin, the kind of decorative structure that marked a boundary more than served a purpose. 2 posts, 8 feet tall, connected by a crossbeam. Rustic. Quaint. Except for what was hanging from it. Nate's breath stopped. A woman. Suspended from the crossbeam by a rope around her neck, body sagging slightly to one side, boots dusted with snow coat, stiff with frost. Her head tilted at an angle that made Nate's stomach clench. Dark hair spilled from beneath a winter hat, frozen strands clinging to a face that was pale, too pale, the color of old paper. For one terrible second, Nate couldn't move, couldn't think. The world had narrowed to that single image, that impossible horror framed in lantern light against the darkening sky. Then training kicked in. The part of him that had been a combat medic, that had seen bodies in positions nobody should be in, that had learned to move when everyone else froze. He ran. Snow sprayed under his boots as he closed the distance, Duke beside him, both of them driven by the same desperate urgency. 50 yards became 20, became 10. Nate's left leg screamed with every impact, the old shrapnel wounds lighting up like someone was driving nails through bone, but he didn't slow. He reached the gate and looked up. She was young, early 30s maybe, slender build, maybe 5'7", wearing a heavy winter coat torn at the elbow. Her hands were behind her back, bound, rope around the wrists tied tight enough that the skin beneath was swollen and raw. Her face was angular, dusted with faint freckles across the bridge of her nose, chestnut brown hair, eyes closed. Nate's hand went to her neck, searching for the pulse point below the jaw. His fingers were shaking. He couldn't tell if it was from cold or adrenaline or the echo of too many other bodies he'd touched in too many other places. There. Faint. Slow. But there. "Jesus Christ, you're alive," he breathed. He pulled the K-bar knife from his belt, 7 inches of fixed blade, the same knife he'd carried in Afghanistan, kept sharp enough to split hair. He reached up, grabbed the rope above her head with one hand, and started sawing. The rope was thick, half-frozen fibers, like wire. The knife bit through slowly strands, parting one by one. Duke circled below, whining the sound high and anxious. The last strand gave way. The woman collapsed. Nate caught her, staggered under the dead weight, his bad leg buckling. They went down together into the snow, Nate twisting at the last second to take the impact on his shoulder instead of letting her hit the ground. Pain flared bright and sharp. He ignored it. He laid her flat on her back, ear to her mouth. Breathing. Shallow, irregular, but breathing. Her skin was cold. Not just cold, ice cold. The kind of cold that meant hypothermia, meant time running out faster than he wanted to think about. He cut the rope, binding her wrists, worked quickly to free her hands. The skin beneath was purple circulation cut off for who knew how long. He started rubbing her hands between his own, trying to force warmth and blood flow back into fingers that felt like frozen wood. Duke pressed against her other side, body heat radiating through his fur. Good dog. Smart dog. He'd done this before in different circumstances in places where keeping someone warm was the difference between mission success and bringing home a body bag. "Stay with me," Nate said, though he didn't know if she could hear him. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Her eyelids fluttered. A sound escaped her throat, barely a whisper, more air than voice. Nate leaned closer. "Don't talk. Save your strength. I'm getting you inside." Her eyes opened. Hazel ringed with green, unfocused, but aware. She looked at him, at Duke, trying to process what was happening. Her lips moved. He had to put his ear almost against her mouth to hear. "He'll kill us. Both." Then she was gone again. Unconscious body, going limp in his arms. Nate looked up at the cabin, then back at the road, then at the darkening forest, pressing in on all sides. The wind picked up, carrying the first flakes of new snow. The storm was coming. And somewhere out there, someone had left this woman to die. Someone who might come back to make sure the job was finished. He gathered her into his arms, stood, despite the scream of protest from his leg, and started walking toward the cabin. Duke moved ahead, alert, scanning the perimeter like he was trained to do. Behind them the rope swayed slightly in the wind, empty now, creaking against the wooden crossbeam. The gate stood open, an entrance that had become a gallows. Nate didn't look back. The cabin door wasn't locked. That should have been his first warning. But his arms were full of a dying woman, and his mind was racing through triage protocols, and his leg was on fire, so he kicked the door open and went inside. Darkness. Complete and absolute. The lantern beam swept across the interior main room stone fireplace, dusty furniture covered in sheets, kitchen area to the left, stairs leading up to the right. Cold. The kind of cold that meant no fire had burned here in days, maybe weeks. Nate crossed to the fireplace, laid the woman down as gently as he could on the rug in front of it. Duke immediately took position beside her, pressed against her side. Nate pulled off his work jacket, draped it over her. Not enough. Not nearly enough. He needed fire. Needed warmth. Needed to stop the hypothermia before it stopped her heart. There was wood stacked beside the fireplace, kindling in a metal bucket, newspaper, matches on the mantel. Nate worked fast, building the fire the way his father had taught him 30 years ago. Small pieces first, structure before size, airflow before adding larger logs. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while his mind ran calculations. Core body temperature. How long had she been out there? Her coat was stiff with frost. Hair frozen. That meant hours minimum. Maybe since last night. Average temperature overnight would have been 10 below 15 wind chill, making it worse. How long could a human body survive that? Not this long. She should be dead. But she wasn't. The fire caught. Flames curled around the kindling, hungry for fuel. Nate fed it carefully, building heat without smothering it. Within 5 minutes, warmth was beginning to radiate into the room. Within 10, the immediate area around the fireplace was almost comfortable. He turned his attention back to the woman. Her coat was soaked through ice crystals forming in the fabric. Wet clothing in hypothermia was a death sentence. It pulled heat from the body faster than the body could generate it. He had to get her dry. Nate hesitated for just a second, then made the decision. Survival first. Modesty was a luxury for people who weren't dying. He unzipped her coat, pulled it off. Underneath, a fleece pullover, also wet. He pulled that off too. Thermal shirt beneath. Jeans stiff with ice. He worked methodically, clinically, the way he'd been trained to work on casualties in the field. This was a patient. This was a body that needed treatment. Nothing more. Duke watched, ears forward, perfectly still. When Nate had her down to her base layer long underwear sports bra, the minimum that preserved some dignity, he grabbed the sheets off the nearest couch, dusted them off, wrapped her tightly. Then he pulled a sleeping bag from his duffel in the truck, came back, cocooned her in that too. He found chemical hand warmers in his emergency kit, cracked them to activate, tucked them against her neck armpits, groin the places where major blood vessels ran close to the surface. He checked her pulse again. Still there. Stronger maybe. Or maybe he was just hoping. Her breathing was better, deeper, more regular. The shivering had started, which was actually a good sign. It meant her body still had enough energy to try to warm itself. Duke settled beside her, head on his paws but eyes open, on guard. Nate sat back on his heels, suddenly aware that his own hands were shaking. Not from cold, from the adrenaline crash that followed action, from the weight of what he'd just found, from the question that was screaming in his head. Who the hell was she, and who had tried to kill her? He looked around the cabin with new eyes. Now that the immediate crisis was handled, now that his heart rate was coming back down, he could see what he'd missed in the rush. The place had been searched, not ransacked, not torn apart, but definitely gone through. Drawers pulled open, cupboards ajar, books on the shelf shoved aside like someone had been checking behind them. The couch cushions weren't quite aligned. Someone had been here, looking for something. Duke's ears turned toward the back of the cabin. He made that sound again, low in his throat. Nate stood, grabbed the lantern, followed the dog's line of sight. There was a window on the back wall facing the forest. The glass was intact, but the frame was cracked, fresh wood showing through old paint, like someone had pried it open, then closed it again, trying to hide the entry point, but not quite succeeding. Someone had broken in. Recently. Nate moved to the window, checked the latch. Unlocked. He locked it, tested it, made sure it would hold. Then he checked the front door. No deadbolt, just a simple keyed lock that wouldn't stop a determined 10-year-old. He dragged a heavy chair over, wedged it under the doorknob. Not perfect, but better. He checked the other windows. Kitchen window locked. Upstairs he'd have to check those later. For now, he needed to stay close to the woman, make sure she didn't crash. When he came back to the fireplace, her eyes were open. She was staring at the ceiling, breathing fast, and shallow panic starting to set in as consciousness returned, and she realized she didn't know where she was, or who was with her, or what had happened. Nate stopped a few feet away, kept his hands visible, kept his voice low and calm. "You're inside," he said. "You're safe. My name is Nate." Her eyes found him, locked on. He could see her trying to process, trying to decide if he was a threat or salvation. Her right hand moved slightly under the sleeping bag, like she was testing whether she could move, whether she was restrained. "You're not tied up," Nate said. "I cut the ropes off. You were hanging from the gate outside. I brought you in. That's my dog, Duke. He's not going to hurt you." Her gaze shifted to Duke, who hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. Some of the fear left her face. People trusted dogs more than they trusted people. Dogs didn't lie. She tried to speak. Her voice came out as a rasp, damaged from the rope, from the cold, from whatever she'd been through before Nate found her. "Water," she managed. Nate nodded, moved to the kitchen, found a cup that looked clean enough, filled it from the tap. The pipes groaned, spat rust, then ran clear. He brought it back, helped her sit up enough to drink without choking. She took 3 sips, coughed, tried again. "Slow," Nate said. "Small sips." She nodded, drank a little more, then lay back. Some color was coming into her face now. Not much, but enough to make her look less like a corpse. "What's your name?" Nate asked. She looked at him for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to trust him with even that much. "Ivy," she finally said. "Ivy Callahan." Nate nodded. "Ivy. Okay. Can you tell me what happened?" Her eyes filled with tears. Not the gentle kind. The hard kind. The kind that came from terror and rage, and the knowledge that you'd come within minutes of dying. They tried to kill me, she whispered. Who? The sheriff. Her voice was stronger now, anger pushing through the fear. Sheriff Hackett. And the judge. They left me out there to freeze to death. Nate felt something cold settle in his gut. Not surprise. Not shock. Something darker. The recognition that he'd stepped into something that wouldn't let him go. Why? He asked. Ivy looked at him, then at Duke, then at the fireplace. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. Because I found what they buried. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall in earnest, thick flakes that would cover tracks and erase evidence and turn the world into a white tomb. The storm had arrived. And somewhere in that storm, the men who had left Ivy Callahan to die were still out there, still hunting. The fire had burned down to coals by the time Ivy could sit up without Nate's help. 2 hours. Maybe 3. Time felt elastic in the cabin, stretched and compressed by the storm hammering against the walls and the weight of what she'd said hanging between them. Because I found what they buried. Nate had given her space at first, made more fire. Found a can of soup in the kitchen chicken noodle expired 6 months ago, but the can wasn't bulging, so probably safe, heated it over the flames in a dented pot. Gave her the whole thing while he ate an MRE from his duffel, the kind that tasted like cardboard and regret, but kept you alive. Duke had positioned himself between them, equidistant, watching both. Neutral territory. The dog's training ran deep. Assess threats, maintain awareness. Don't choose sides until you know who needs protecting from whom. Now, Ivy sat wrapped in the sleeping bag back against the stone hearth, hands cupped around the empty soup bowl like she was still trying to pull warmth from it. Her hair had dried in messy waves around her face. In the firelight, Nate could see the bruises clearly now. Dark purple marks around her throat where the rope had bitten in. Scratches on her cheeks. A split lip that had scabbed over. This hadn't been her first beating, just the one that was supposed to be her last. "How long was I out there?" she asked quietly. Nate checked his watch. 8:47 p.m. "Don't know. How long do you remember?" "They brought me here yesterday." "Late afternoon. Maybe 4 o'clock. She touched her throat gingerly. "Hackett said freezing was kinder than what he could have done. Said I'd just go to sleep. Wouldn't feel it. 28 hours. Give or take. She should be dead. Brain damage at minimum. But she was sitting here talking, thinking, remembering. Humans were tougher than people gave them credit for. Or maybe she was just lucky. Or maybe someone wanted her found." "Tell me about the documents," Nate said. Ivy looked at him. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." "Garrett Sullivan left me this cabin. Man I barely knew saved his life once in Afghanistan. He's dead now. Car accident 3 weeks ago." Nate fed another log to the fire. "Except I don't think it was an accident. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you were left here to die at the property he willed to a combat medic who might actually be able to save you." Understanding flickered across her face. "Garrett tried to help me." Before they killed him." "Tell me." So she did. Ivy Callahan had worked for Northern Plains Legal Aid for 6 years. Small non-profit, 3 lawyers, 2 paralegals operating out of a converted house in Sheridan. Their clients were the people nobody else wanted: domestic violence, victims, disability claimants, families facing eviction. The kind of work that paid nothing and mattered everything. 8 months ago, a woman named Beth Henriksen had come in crying. Foreclosure notice. The bank was taking her ranch, 400 acres her family had worked for 3 generations. She was 2 months behind on payments, just 2 months because her husband had cancer and the medical bills were drowning them. Ivy had taken the case. Standard stuff initially. Negotiate with the bank file for extension buy time. But when she pulled the property records, something didn't add up. The ranch wasn't mortgaged to a bank. It was mortgaged to something called Ridgeline Holdings LLC. A company Ivy had never heard of. And the foreclosure wasn't for missed payments. According to the filing, the Henriksens had defaulted on taxes. Taxes that the county assessor's office had no record of them owing. Ivy dug deeper. Found 18 other families in Powder River County facing the same situation. Different properties, different sizes, but the same pattern. Foreclosure notices from Ridgeline Holdings for debts that didn't exist in any public record. She started making calls. County clerk, State Revenue Department. Nobody had heard of Ridgeline Holdings. The LLC was registered in Delaware, no physical address, no officers listed. A ghost company. But the foreclosures were real. Families were losing their land. 13 had already been evicted. 5 more had pending cases. Ivy contacted the families, asked questions, found the common thread.
Every single property sat on top of the Powder River Basin rare earth deposit. Neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium.
Elements nobody could pronounce, but everybody needed for electric cars and wind turbines and smartphones, worth billions if you could get permits to mine it. And someone was systematically stealing the land from families who didn't know what they were sitting on. I started following the money, Ivy said, her voice hollow in the quiet cabin. Took me 3 months, but I traced Ridgeline back through 4 shell companies. Want to know who owned it? Nate already knew. Hackett and the judge. She nodded. Sheriff Vaughan Hackett and Judge Raymond Blackwell. Partners. They were using Blackwell's court to rubber stamp foreclosures on properties Hackett identified as valuable. Filing fake tax liens, fake debt claims. The families couldn't afford lawyers to fight it. By the time anyone realized it was fraud, they'd already lost everything. How much land? 19 properties, 7,000 acres total. Conservative estimate on the mineral rights, $600 million. Nate let out a slow breath. Men had killed for a lot less. I made copies, Ivy continued. Deeds, court orders, wire transfers. Found Ridgeline's bank records. They weren't even trying to hide it. I had everything, enough to bring RICO charges, send them both to federal prison for 20 years minimum. So why didn't you? I tried. Her hands tightened on the bowl. I contacted the FBI field office in Denver. Left 3 messages. Nobody called back. Contacted the state attorney general. They said they'd look into it. 2 weeks later, Hackett showed up at my apartment. She fell silent. Nate didn't push. He'd seen enough interrogations to know when someone needed space to find the words for the thing they didn't want to say. He was polite, she finally continued. Came alone. Said he'd heard I was asking questions about property records. Said he was concerned I might have misunderstood some routine legal procedures. Asked if I'd like to discuss it over coffee.
You said no. I recorded the conversation on my phone. He sat on my couch and told me that sometimes good people make mistakes by interfering in things they don't understand. That Powder River County took care of its own problems, that outsiders who caused trouble tended to have accidents. Did he threaten you directly? He didn't have to. 3 days later, my car wouldn't start. Mechanic found the brake lines had been cut. Week after that, someone broke into my apartment while I was at work. Didn't take anything. Just left everything opened. Drawers, closets, medicine cabinet. Message was clear: we can get to you any time. Duke shifted position, rested his head on Ivy's knee. She reached down, absently stroked his ears. The dog's presence seemed to steady her. I knew I couldn't go to local law enforcement. Hackett was the law. I couldn't trust the state. So I made backups. USB drives, printed files, uploaded some to cloud storage under a fake account.
Sent 1 set to a P.O. box in Billings. Hid another set. She looked at the fireplace. Nate followed her gaze. Here. Garrett found me in the courthouse one day going through old mining records. I didn't know who he was. He said he'd served with the Rangers, did some security consulting now. Said he'd noticed me asking questions that made certain people nervous. Asked if I needed help. You trusted him. He showed me his DD-214, his discharge papers. Told me about Afghanistan, about the medic who'd saved his life. Said if things got bad, I should bring my evidence to his cabin. Nobody knew about it. Off-grid, hard to find. He said if something happened to him, the cabin would go to you. A combat medic. Someone who'd know what to do with a person who needed saving. The pieces were falling into place now. Garrett hadn't just left Nate property. He'd left him a mission. A promise made to a woman in danger, kept even after death. When did you hide the evidence here? 6 weeks ago, January 3rd. Came up on a Sunday when I knew Garrett was in town. Put everything in a waterproof box, hid it in the fireplace. Garrett showed me the loose stone, said nobody would think to look there. And 3 weeks ago, Garrett had his accident. Ivy's eyes filled with tears. They killed him because of me, because he tried to help me. They killed him because he was in their way, Nate said quietly. Same reason they tried to kill you. This isn't your fault. I was so careful, she whispered. I didn't tell anyone else. I kept working on other cases, acted normal. But somehow they knew. 5 days ago, Hackett came to my office, said he needed to talk to me about a client. I followed him outside and there were 2 men waiting. They grabbed me, threw me in a truck. I fought, but... She stopped, jaw tight. They took me to a house outside of town, tied me to a chair. Hackett wanted to know where I'd hidden the evidence. I didn't tell him. So they... Her hand went to her split lip. They hurt me. Not enough to kill. Just enough to make the point. Nate's hands curled into fists. He forced them to relax. After 2 days, they decided I wasn't going to talk. Hackett said if I didn't have the evidence on me, it didn't matter. Nobody would believe a crazy woman who killed herself because she was depressed. They brought me here yesterday, strung me up on that gate, left me to freeze. Why here specifically? Hackett said it was poetic. The place I'd hidden evidence against him would be the place I died. Once I was gone and Garrett was gone, nobody would connect any of it. Except they'd underestimated timing. They'd assumed the cabin would sit empty for months, that by the time anyone found it, Ivy would be nothing but bones and frozen meat. They hadn't counted on a lawyer executing a will quickly. Hadn't counted on Nate arriving the same day the storm came. Hadn't counted on Duke. "The evidence is still here?" Nate asked. "Should be, unless they found it when they—" She gestured at the ransacked cabin. Nate stood crossed to the fireplace, looked at the stones that formed the hearth and chimney. 18 inches deep, local granite fitted together with mortar that had cracked with age. He ran his hands over the surface, feeling for anything loose. Duke padded over, sniffed at the base of the fireplace. His tail went rigid. A low whine built in his throat. "That's the one," Ivy said. "Bottom row, 3 stones from the right." Nate found it. A stone slightly smaller than the other's mortar around it, looser. He worked his fingers into the gaps, wiggled it. The stone shifted. He pulled harder, felt it come free with a grinding scrape. Behind it, a cavity. And inside the cavity, exactly as Ivy had described, a waterproof metal box. Nate pulled it out, set it on the hearth. The box was maybe 12 inches long, 8 inches wide, 4 inches deep. Military surplus, the kind designed to keep documents dry in the field. He popped the latches. Inside, a USB drive in a sealed plastic bag. A manila envelope sealed with packing tape. A stack of photographs. Polaroids, edges yellowed. Nate opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies, dozens of them. Property deeds, court orders bearing Judge Blackwell's signature, bank statements showing wire transfers from Ridgeline Holdings to accounts in the Caymans. A spreadsheet listing 19 properties' acquisition dates, estimated mineral values. And a handwritten ledger in someone's careful script documenting payoffs. Dates and amounts. March 15th, 2024. County Assessor Williams, $15,000. June 3rd, 2024. State Senator Morrison, $50,000. It went on, page after page, a complete record of a conspiracy that reached higher than just a sheriff and a judge. Jesus, Nate breathed. That's not even all of it, Ivy said. The USB has recordings, phone calls, meetings. I wore a wire to 3 different conversations with Blackwell. Got him on tape offering me money to drop cases against Ridgeline. Nate picked up the USB drive, turned it over in his hand. This thing was worth $600 million to some people, worth death to others. The photographs were the last item. Nate spread them out. Surveillance shots. Hackett meeting with men in suits. Judge Blackwell signing papers in his chambers, clearly unaware he was being photographed. And one shot that made Nate's blood run cold. Garrett Sullivan standing next to Ivy Callahan outside the Powder River County Courthouse. Both of them smiling. Dated 6 weeks ago. Someone had been watching, documenting, building their own case against the people trying to expose them. They knew all along, Nate said quietly. They were just waiting for the right time to move. They killed Garrett first because he was the bigger threat, Ivy said. Military-trained license to carry, had resources. I was just a legal aid lawyer. Easy to discredit, easier to kill. Duke's ears snapped forward. His body went rigid, nose pointed toward the front of the cabin. Nate heard it half a second later. The distant rumble of engines. Diesel. Heavy vehicles. More than one. They're here, Ivy whispered, face going pale. Nate shoved the documents back into the box, snapped it shut. His mind raced through options. The Dodge Ram outside had slashed tires he'd checked while building the fire, found all 4 cut to ribbons. They weren't driving out. The storm was getting worse, visibility down to maybe 20 feet. They couldn't run into that, not with Ivy still weak from hypothermia, which meant they had to hide. Or fight. Nate wasn't a fighter. Not anymore. He'd left that part of himself in Afghanistan, buried it under 9 years of trying to be a normal person with a normal life. But normal people didn't get found in cabins with evidence that could bring down a criminal conspiracy. Normal people didn't have German shepherds trained to kill. The engines grew louder. Headlights swept across the cabin's front windows. Crawl space, Nate said. Under the floor. Now. He'd found it earlier while checking the cabin's perimeter, a trapdoor near the back wall hidden under a rug. 4 feet deep, ran the length of the cabin, designed for storage or maybe bootlegging back in the day. Accessible from inside. Ivy didn't argue. She dropped the sleeping bag, moved on hands and knees to where Nate was pulling up the rug.
He lifted the trapdoor, revealed the darkness below. "Get in. Don't make a sound. Don't come out unless I tell you, or unless—" He stopped. "Unless what?" "Unless you hear gunshots and then nothing after. Then you run. Straight north through the trees. 2 miles, you'll hit Forest Service Road 328. Flag down anyone you see. Nate, go."
She climbed down. Nate handed her the metal box. "This is more important than either of us. You understand? This gets out, it's over for them." She nodded, disappeared into the darkness. Nate lowered the trapdoor, kicked the rug back over it. Not perfect, but in dim light, it would pass a casual inspection. The engines cut off outside. Doors slammed. Voices muffled by wind and walls. Nate looked at Duke. The dog was in full alert mode now, ears forward, hackles, slightly raised weight balanced on all 4 paws. Ready. "Easy, boy," Nate said softly. "Let's see what they want." He crossed to the door, pulled the chair away, stood with his hand on the knob, took a breath, opened it. 3 pickup trucks were parked in the clearing headlights cutting through the falling snow. 7 men stood in a loose semicircle 30 feet from the porch. They were armed rifles, shotguns, at least one pistol Nate could see. Not pointing them at him, yet, just holding them, casual. The way men hold guns when they want you to know they have them. The man in the center was massive. 6'3", at least 240, wearing a sheriff's department winter jacket and a Stetson that somehow stayed on despite the wind. His face was ruddy weathered, the face of a man who spent time outdoors. Probably 50s, though hard living made age difficult to judge. Sheriff Vaughn Hackett. Had to be. "Nate Cordell." Hackett's voice carried easily over the wind. Not shouting, just projecting. The voice of someone used to being obeyed. "That's right. Mind if we come in cold out here?" "Yeah, I mind. What do you want?" Hackett smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Just checking on you. Heard someone had inherited Garrett Sullivan's place. Thought I'd make sure you got settled in okay. Hell of a storm to arrive in." "I'm settled. Appreciate the concern." "You alone up here?" "Me and my dog." Hackett's eyes went to Duke, who stood at Nate's left side, perfectly still. "That a military dog?" "Was. He's retired. Must have known Garrett pretty well, him leaving you his property. Saved his life once. Afghanistan." "That's so." Hackett took a step closer. His men shifted with him, maintaining the semicircle. "Funny thing, Garrett had a friend, woman named Ivy Callahan. Works for legal aid. She's been missing for 5 days now. Family's worried sick." Nate kept his face neutral. "Sorry to hear that. Hope you find her. Thing is, last we knew she'd been asking about this property. About Garrett. Right before she disappeared. Makes a man wonder if maybe she came up here. Maybe she's still here. Nobody here but me. Mind if we look around just to be sure?" "Yeah, I mind. This is private property. You got a warrant?" Hackett's smile widened. "Now see, that's interesting. Most folks cooperate with law enforcement when someone's missing. Most folks want to help. But you're being difficult. Makes me think maybe you got something to hide. Makes me think you don't have probable cause." 2 of Hackett's men started moving, angling toward the sides of the cabin. Flanking positions. Nate recognized the tactic. Surround, isolate, overwhelm. Duke's growl was so low Nate felt it more than heard it. A vibration in the air, a warning that carried weight. "Call your men off," Nate said quietly. "Or I let the dog work." Hackett raised a hand. The men stopped, but they didn't back up. "You don't want to make an enemy of me, Mr. Cordell. I'm the law in this county. I'm also the man standing between you and 7 very cold, very armed deputies who are wondering why you're being so uncooperative." "These don't look like deputies." Nate nodded at the men. None of them wore uniforms. One had a visible face tattoo. Another looked like he'd been in a fight recently, black eye still purple. These looked like hired guns. "Semantics. Point is, we're coming in that cabin. Either you step aside or we move you aside. Your choice." Nate's hand moved to his hip. Not fast, not threatening, just resting there where a gun would be if he was carrying one. He wasn't. But Hackett didn't know that. "You really want to do this?" Nate asked. "You really want to shoot a veteran on his own property because he wouldn't let you search without a warrant that's going to look good in the papers? Sheriff kills unarmed man during illegal search. FBI's going to love that." Something flickered in Hackett's eyes. Not fear. Calculation. "Nobody said anything about shooting," Hackett said. "We're just having a conversation. Conversation's over. Get off my land." For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind howled. Snow fell. 7 men with guns faced 1 man and a dog. Then Hackett stepped back. "Have it your way, but Mr. Cordell, that storm's going to get worse before it gets better. Roads are going to be impassable. Phone lines are already down. Cell towers too, I'd wager. You're going to be stuck up here for days."
All alone. The threat was clear. Isolated. No help coming. No witnesses. "I've been in worse places," Nate said. Hackett tipped his hat. "I'm sure you have. We'll be seeing you." He turned, walked back to his truck. His men followed, getting into the 3 vehicles. Engines started. Headlights swung around. But they didn't leave. The trucks pulled back maybe 50 yards, parked in a line across the road, blocking the only way out. Men got out, lit cigarettes, leaned against the hoods, watching, waiting. Nate closed the door, locked it, dragged the chair back under the knob. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Duke whined, pawed at the rug, covering the trapdoor. "Ivy," Nate called quietly. "You can come up." The trapdoor lifted. Ivy's face appeared pale in the firelight. "They're not leaving." "No, they're making sure we don't." "What are we going to do?" Nate crossed to his duffel bag, pulled out the battery-powered radio he'd brought.
Turned it on, scanned frequencies. Nothing but static and the automated emergency broadcast about the storm. He tried his cell phone. No signal. Not even 1 bar. They were cut off. Exactly as Hackett had said. Ivy climbed out of the crawl space, hugged herself. They're going to wait until the storm gets bad enough that nobody will question what happened. Then they'll come back. Burn the cabin. Kill us both. Blame it on a faulty heater and a veteran who didn't know how to maintain a fireplace. Probably. You say that very calmly. Panicking won't help. Nate knelt beside his duffel, started pulling items out. MREs, water purification tablets, first aid kit, 50 feet of paracord, 3 road flares, compass, his K-bar knife, and at the very bottom, wrapped in an oil-stained towel, something he'd hoped never to touch again. A pistol. Glock 19, 9mm, 15-round magazine. Military surplus, same model he'd carried in Afghanistan. He'd bought it 3 years ago, after a bad night when the PTSD was worse than usual, and he'd convinced himself he needed protection. Fired it exactly once at a range, hated how it felt, shoved it in the duffel, and tried to forget about it. He checked the chamber. Empty. Magazine seated. He racked the slide chambered around. The familiar weight of it in his hand made his stomach turn. "You know how to shoot?" he asked Ivy. "My dad took me hunting. I can handle a rifle." "This isn't hunting." "I know." He looked at her. Really looked. She was scared, exhausted, bruised. But there was steel underneath. The kind of steel it took to go up against corrupt officials with nothing but paperwork and determination. The kind of steel that kept you alive when you were hanging from a rope in 20 below weather. "There's another option," Nate said slowly. "What?" "Frozen Creek Ranger Station. 8 miles north. It'll have a radio, maybe a landline. Old system might still work even if cell towers are down. We get there, we can call for help. Real help. FBI, state police, someone Hackett doesn't own. 8 miles in a blizzard. At night. With armed men hunting us. Yeah. And if we don't make it, then we die trying instead of waiting to die here." Ivy looked at the door, at the windows, at the thin walls that wouldn't stop bullets. Looked at Duke, who sat perfectly still, waiting for orders. Looked at Nate. "When do we leave?" Nate checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. He looked out the window. The storm was intensifying, visibility dropping fast. The men by the trucks were stamping their feet, huddling close to stay warm. They wouldn't want to stay out there all night. 2 hours, he said. "Let the storm get worse. Let them get colder, more miserable. They'll start to think we're settled in for the night. Then we move." Ivy nodded. "What do we do until then?" "Get ready." They spent the next 90 minutes preparing. Nate dressed Ivy in layers. Garrett's old flannel shirt over her own, his winter coat over that 2 pairs of socks, gloves with hand warmers stuffed inside. He filled 2 water bottles, packed 4 MREs, divided the load between them. The metal box with the evidence went into a waterproof bag, then into a small backpack Ivy would carry. Nate took the heavier pack, his gear, the first aid kit, extra ammunition for the Glock. He tried the radio again. Static. Tried his phone. Nothing. The world outside this cabin had ceased to exist. At 11:30, Nate killed the fire. Let it burn down to nothing. Made the cabin look like they'd gone to sleep. He opened the trap door again, gestured for Ivy to climb down. "Wait here. Give me 5 minutes. If you hear shooting, run north. Don't stop." "Where are you going?" "To even the odds." He left her in the crawl space, Duke standing guard. crossed to the back window, the one with the broken frame, unlocked it, eased it open inch by inch, trying not to make sound. The wind helped, howling loud enough to cover small noises. Nate slipped through the window, dropped into snow up to his knees. Cold hit like a hammer. He was dressed for it. Canvas jacket, wool hat, gloves, but it still stole his breath. He circled wide around the cabin, staying in the tree line, moving slowly. The trucks were parked 50 yards up the road. Headlights off now, just parking lights glowing. He could see shapes inside the cabs. 2 men in the first truck, 3 in the second, 2 in the third. 7 men. 7 targets. No, not targets. Nate wasn't a killer. Never had been, even in war. He was a medic. His job had been to save lives, not take them. But he could make their job harder. He crept close to the last truck, the one farthest from the cabin, pulled his knife, knelt beside the rear tire. The KA bar blade punched through rubber like paper. Air hissed out. He moved to the front tire, punched again.
2 down. The next truck. 4 tires. Then the third. Methodical. Quiet. By the time he was done, all 3 vehicles were sitting on flat rubber. They could still drive technically, but not fast. Not in snow. Not far. Nate retreated into the trees, circled back to the cabin. Climbed through the window. Closed it. Locked it. Ivy was still in the crawl space, clutching the backpack. Duke sat at the edge, ears forward. "We're leaving now," Nate said. "Stay close. Step where I step. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. No questions. Understood?" Understood. They climbed out the window into the storm. The wind had picked up to 40, maybe 50 miles per hour, driving snow horizontal. Visibility was maybe 15 feet. Perfect conditions for disappearing. Nate led them north into the forest, away from the road and the trucks and the men who wanted them dead. Duke ranged ahead, reading the terrain with senses Nate didn't have.
The dog's limp was more pronounced now, old injuries aggravated by the cold and the movement. But he didn't slow down. They'd gone maybe 200 yards when Nate heard it. A shout. Muffled by wind, but unmistakable. Someone had discovered the slashed tires. Nate grabbed Ivy's arm, pulled her into a crouch behind a fallen log. "Don't move!" Flashlight beams cut through the darkness back at the cabin, voices angry. Someone fired up a radio-static bursts carried on the wind. Then the beams started sweeping the forest. They were coming. Nate looked at Ivy, at Duke, at the endless white darkness stretching ahead. 8 miles to the ranger station. 8 miles through hell. "Let's move," he said. And they ran into the storm. The forest swallowed them whole. Darkness pressed in from all sides, broken only by the sweep of Nate's headlamp, cutting narrow paths through falling snow. Trees became shadows, became nothing, the world reduced to the next step, and the step after that. Wind screamed through the pines, a sound like wolves howling, like the mountain itself was trying to shake them loose. Duke moved ahead, a grey ghost, barely visible, even at 10 feet. The dog's nose was down, following something scent instinct, some internal compass that guided working dogs through conditions that would lose a human in minutes. Nate trusted that compass more than he trusted his own eyes. Behind him, Ivy stumbled. Nate caught her arm, kept her upright. She was breathing hard, already exhaling clouds of steam that whipped away in the wind. The hypothermia from earlier had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit. But she didn't complain, just kept moving. They'd been walking 15 minutes when the first shots rang out. Not close, maybe quarter mile back, hard to judge in the storm, but unmistakable. 3 rapid cracks, rifle fire, the sound flattened and distorted by wind and distance. "They're shooting blind," Nate said, voice raised to carry over the wind. "Trying to flush us out. Keep moving." The terrain sloped downward gradually at first, then steeper. Nate's left leg screamed with each impact. Old shrapnel wounds lighting up like someone was driving ice picks through the bone. He gritted his teeth, pushed through it. Pain was just information. Information you could choose to ignore. Duke stopped suddenly, body rigid. A low growl built in his throat. Nate killed his headlamp, pulled Ivy down into a crouch. Darkness crashed over them like a wave. He waited, listening past his own breathing, past Ivy's ragged gasps, past the wind. Voices. Faint, but getting closer. 2 men, maybe 3, moving through the trees to their left. Flashlight beams bounced and weaved, searching. Nate leaned close to Ivy's ear. "Don't move. Don't breathe loud." They waited. The voices grew louder, close enough now to make out words. "Fucking waste of time." "Hackett says we search, we search. Freeze our asses off for some legal aid bitch and a crippled vet." The beams swept closer. 30 feet. 20. Nate's hand went to the Glock fingers curling around the grip. He didn't draw it. Not yet. Shooting meant noise. Noise meant everyone would know exactly where they were. Duke's growl deepened. Nate put a hand on the dog's shoulder, applied pressure. The signal for quiet. Duke fell silent, but didn't relax. The flashlight beams passed 10 feet to their left. Nate could see the men now, 2 of them bulky shapes in winter gear rifles slung over their shoulders. They were walking fast, not searching carefully, cold and miserable and wanting to get back to the trucks. They passed, kept going, voices fading into the storm. Nate waited a full minute before standing. "Let's move. Different direction. They'll loop back." They angled east, then north again, adding distance and confusion to their trail. The snow was coming down harder now, 3 inches an hour, easy, covering their tracks almost as fast as they made them. Good for hiding, bad for everything else. 20 minutes later, they hit the ravine. The ground just dropped away, no warning, a 40-foot cliff face carved by ancient water flow. Nate stopped at the edge, shined his headlamp down. Steep walls, rocky bottom, a frozen creek running through the middle. No way down here, not safely. "We go around," he said. "Which way?" Ivy's voice was shaking. From cold or fear or exhaustion, Nate couldn't tell. Probably all 3. Duke had already made the choice, trotting east along the rim. Nate followed. Ivy stayed close behind, one hand on his shoulder to keep from losing him in the darkness. They walked for 10 minutes before Duke found a section where the ravine wall had collapsed, creating a steep but navigable slope. More sliding than walking, but possible. "I'll go first," Nate said. "Ivy, you wait here with Duke until I'm down. Then you come. Duke will follow." "What if you fall? Then you keep going without me. North, 8 miles. Don't stop." He didn't wait for her to argue. Started down the slope, half walking, half sliding, using exposed roots and rocks for handholds. His left leg gave out halfway down. He fell the last 15 feet, hit the bottom hard shoulder, taking the impact. Pain flared bright and sharp. He rolled, came up gasping. "I'm good," he called up. "Come on." Ivy descended more carefully, testing each foothold. Duke waited at the top until she was halfway down, then picked his own path, 4 legs, giving him better balance than either human. They reached the bottom, without further injury. The ravine offered some protection from the wind. Not much, but enough to make breathing easier. The creek was frozen solid ice, thick enough to walk on. Probably. Nate tested it with his boot. Felt solid. He took a step. The ice held. Another step. Still good. "Single file," he said. "Step exactly where I step. We spread out, we risk thin spots." They started across. Nate went first. Duke second, Ivy third. The ice creaked under their weight but didn't crack. 40 feet to the other side. 30, 20. The ice beneath Ivy gave way with a sound like a gunshot. She dropped through one leg, plunging into water so cold it might as well have been fire. She screamed, couldn't help it. The sound ripped from her lungs before she could stop it. Nate spun, saw her struggling ice crumbling around the hole. He lunged back, grabbed her arm, hauled. The ice cracked further. His own feet broke through. Water hit like electricity, shocking every nerve, stopping thought. Nate's legs went numb instantly. He kept pulling, got his other hand under Ivy's armpit, lifted with everything he had. Duke grabbed Ivy's coat in his teeth, pulled. Between man and dog, they dragged her onto thicker ice, then to the bank. Nate crawled out after her limbs already going stiff. They collapsed on the frozen ground, both of them soaked to the waist, Ivy sobbing from pain and cold and shock. "We have to—" Nate's teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. "We have to get warm. Now." Hypothermia could kill in minutes at these temperatures. Wet clothes made it exponentially worse. They needed fire shelter dry clothing. They had none of those things. Nate forced his frozen fingers to work, yanked off Ivy's boots, her soaked jeans. His own pants were ice-stiffened, hard to remove. He got them off, threw them aside. Their legs were white, bloodless toes already turning blue. The packs, Ivy managed through chattering teeth. Nate grabbed them, dumped the contents. Emergency bivy sack, a thin, reflective sleeping bag designed for survival situations. He tore it open, pulled Ivy inside, then climbed in after her. Skin to skin, the only way to share body heat fast enough to matter. Duke pressed against them from outside, adding his warmth to the equation. They lay there shivering violently, the bivy sack barely big enough for 2 people intimate in a way that transcended modesty or embarrassment. This was survival. Biology. 2 mammals trying not to freeze to death. Your scream," Nate said. "They heard it. They'll come." Can't run." "I know." The shivering was actually good. It meant their bodies were still trying to warm themselves, still had enough energy to fight. When the shivering stopped, that's when you died. Nate felt in his pack with numb fingers, found the chemical hand warmers, cracked them to activate, shoved them against Ivy's neck, her armpits, her groin. The major blood vessels. The warmers heated up painfully hot against frozen skin, but it was the kind of pain that meant life. They waited. Time became elastic, meaningless. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been 30. Feelings started to return. First as pins and needles, then as burning agony like someone was driving nails through their feet. Ivy whimpered. Nate just breathed through it, focusing on each inhale and exhale. Duke's ears pricked up. The dog stood, moved to the edge of their shelter, stared into the darkness. A growl rumbled in his chest. Flashlight beams, voices, getting closer. Heard something this way. Probably just a branch falling. Check anyway. Nate's hand found the Glock. His fingers were still clumsy grip uncertain, but he could pull a trigger. The pistol felt wrong in his hand. He'd spent 2 years as a combat medic in Afghanistan and never once fired his sidearm in anger. Never wanted to. His job was to preserve life, not end it. But these men were coming to kill them. Had already tried once. Would try again. Sometimes preserving one life meant ending another. The beams grew closer. 2 men, 50 feet away. 40. They were walking the ravine, checking both sides. Duke's growl deepened. Nate put pressure on the dog's shoulder again. Wait, not yet. 20 feet. Nate could see them now in the reflected glow of their flashlights. The one on the left was young, maybe 25, thin face, nervous energy. The one on the right was older 40s, thick beard, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. 10 feet. The bearded one stopped, raised his light. The beam swept over the collapsed section of ravine wall, the disturbed snow, the obvious signs that someone had come down here recently. Found something, he called into his radio. Nate made the decision in a fraction of a second. If he waited, they'd call for backup. If he shot them, everyone would know exactly where he was. There was only one option left. He erupted from the bivy sack, mostly naked, half-frozen, but moving on pure adrenaline and training that never quite left. 3 steps, and he was on them before they could react. The bearded man turned. Nate hit him with everything. He had a straight punch to the solar plexus that doubled the man over, grabbed his rifle as he fell, ripped it from his hands. The younger one was already bringing his own rifle up. Duke hit him like a freight train, 88 pounds of muscle and teeth, and training knocking him backward. The rifle fired a deafening crack in the confined space, but the shot went wild, burying itself in the ravine wall. Nate spun the rifle he'd taken, used it like a club, brought the stock down on the young man's wrist. Bones snapped. The kid screamed, dropped his weapon. Duke had him by the arm, teeth sunk deep, holding but not tearing, waiting for the command to release or to kill. Duke out, Nate ordered. The dog released backed-up body, still coiled and ready. Both men were down. The bearded one was gasping for air, trying to get his wind back. The younger one was cradling his broken wrist, tears streaming down his face. Nate grabbed the radio from the bearded man's belt, the spare magazines from both their jackets. Took their rifles. One Remington 700, one AR-15 pattern. Good weapons. He disabled them quickly, field-stripped the bolt from the Remington, pulled the charging handle from the AR, threw the parts in different directions into the snow. You tell Hackett something, Nate said, voice cold and steady, despite the shaking in his limbs. You tell him he's done. The evidence is already out. FBI knows. State police knows. He's finished. It was a lie. But they didn't know that. He grabbed the bivy sack the Pax gestured to Ivy. She was struggling back into her wet jeans, face twisted with pain. No choice. They couldn't run half-naked through a blizzard. They climbed out of the ravine on the far side, Duke leading again, leaving the 2 men behind. The younger one was still crying. The bearded one was on his radio calling for help. They'll send everyone now, Ivy said through chattering teeth. They know we're armed. They'll come heavy. Let them come. We're not stopping. But even as he said it, Nate knew the truth. They were both hypothermic, exhausted. Ivy couldn't run, could barely walk. His own leg was threatening to give out completely. They had maybe 2 more miles in them. 3, if they were lucky. The ranger station was still 6 miles away. They weren't going to make it. 30 minutes later, Nate spotted the structure through the trees. At first he thought it was a mirage exhaustion playing tricks, but Duke made for it directly, and mirages didn't interest dogs. A trapper's hut. Old, maybe built in the 40s or 50s, 1-room metal roof, half collapsed, but walls still standing. Better than nothing. They stumbled inside. The interior was maybe 8 by 10 feet, smelling of rust and rot and old animal pelts. But it was out of the wind. That alone made it paradise. Nate got Ivy down in the corner, wrapped her in the bivy sack again. His hands were shaking too badly to do anything more complicated. Duke curled against her, sharing heat. Nate's phone was still in the pack waterproof case, having saved it. He checked it. 12:47 a.m. They'd been moving for an hour and 20 minutes. Felt like days. No signal. Still no signal. He checked the radio he'd taken from Hackett's man, turned the volume down low, pressed it to his ear. Static, then voices. Lost contact with Boone and Reeves. Last position was the ravine. Cordell has weapons now, approach with caution. Sheriff says smoke them out, burn them if you have to. Nate turned it off. They knew where he was, roughly. They'd be converging. He looked around the hut. One door, one window, no glass. Metal walls that wouldn't stop bullets. This wasn't a shelter. It was a coffin. "We can't stay here," he said. Ivy looked at him. Her lips were blue again. Shivering had mostly stopped. That was bad. That meant her body was giving up, shutting down to protect the core. "Can't walk anymore," she whispered. Nate knew she was right. Knew pushing her further would kill her as surely as a bullet. But staying meant dying when Hackett's men found them. Duke's ears swiveled. Alert. Company coming. Nate moved to the window, looked out. Headlights. Multiple vehicles. ATVs, 4 of them bouncing through the snow. 8 men, maybe more. They'd found the hut. Nate pulled the Glock, checked the magazine. 15 rounds. He had 2 spare magazines from the men in the ravine. 45 rounds total against 8 men with rifles. "Ivy," he said quietly, "can you shoot?" She nodded weakly. He gave her the pistol, showed her how to release the safety, how to aim center mass. "Anyone comes through that door that's not me or Duke, you pull the trigger until it's empty. Understand? Where are you going?" To even the odds. He grabbed the Remington 700 bolt he'd kept, reassembled it into the rifle. 5 rounds in the magazine. Not much, but a .308 Winchester round could punch through an engine block, or a man, or both. The ATVs stopped 100 yards out. Smart, not coming in blind. Men dismounted, spread out, started advancing in a tactical formation. These weren't weekend warriors anymore. This was professional. Nate found a position 30 yards from the hut, prone behind a fallen log rifle braced. The scope was basic, no night vision, but the ATV headlights gave him enough illumination to see silhouettes. He picked his target. The man on the far left, moving too confidently, not using cover properly. Nate settled the crosshair's center mass, let out half a breath, held it. Every instinct screamed at him not to pull the trigger. He was a medic, a healer. The Hippocratic Oath said first, do no harm, but that oath didn't account for men who left women to freeze to death. Didn't account for corrupt sheriffs burning down cabins with people inside. Sometimes doing no harm meant doing terrible things to terrible people. Nate adjusted for wind, squeezed. The rifle bucked. The man went down. Nate didn't wait to see if it was a kill shot. Worked the bolt, ejected the casing, chambered another round. Picked a new target. Fired. The second man dropped. Chaos. The remaining men scattered, dove for cover rifles, coming up firing blind into the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit the night. Rounds cracked past Nate's position, burying themselves in trees and snow. He fired again. Missed. The return fire was getting more accurate. Someone had spotted his muzzle flash. Rounds impacted the log he was behind, throwing splinters. Time to move. Nate low-crawled 10 yards right, found new cover. The shooting had stopped. The men were regrouping, being more careful now. They knew they were up against someone who could shoot. Duke appeared beside him, silent as smoke. The dog must have circled around from the hut. Good. That meant Ivy was alone, but had the pistol. "Duke," Nate whispered. "Find, hunt." The dog's eyes gleamed. He understood. This was what he'd been trained for. Not to kill, but to locate, to harry, to make the enemy's life hell. Duke vanished into the darkness. 30 seconds later, a man screamed. Not a death scream, a fear scream, the sound of someone being attacked by 88 pounds of fur and teeth and rage. Another scream, then gunfire, panicked and wild. Nate used the distraction, moved again, flanking, found a man crouched behind an ATV, back-turned, focused on where Duke had been. Nate closed the distance, hit him with the rifle stock. The man dropped. Someone shouted his name. "Cordell, enough!" Nate turned. Sheriff Hackett stood in the headlights, hands raised, no weapon visible. "You made your point," Hackett called. "You can fight, but you can't win. There's 20 more men coming." "State line is 40 miles away. You got nowhere to run." Nate said nothing. Kept the rifle trained on center mass. "Here's what's going to happen," Hackett continued. "You give me the woman and the evidence. You walk away. I don't care where you go. Mexico, Canada, wherever. Just go. You got my word. Your word means shit. Then what do you want? Money I can make you rich. $250,000 cash untraceable. You and your dog disappear live like kings somewhere warm. Nate's finger rested on the trigger. One shot. End it now. No more sheriff. No more threat. But killing Hackett didn't stop the judge. Didn't stop whoever else was involved. The corruption ran deeper than one man. FBI is already coming, Nate said. It was still a lie. But he sold it. Agent out of Denver. Dutch Calloway. He got the evidence this morning. Email cloud storage. You're done, Hackett. Uncertainty flickered across the sheriff's face. Just for a second. But it was there. You're bluffing.
Am I? You willing to bet your life on that? Hackett's hand dropped toward his hip. Nate saw the motion started to squeeze. Duke hit Hackett from the side, 70 pounds of momentum knocking him sprawling. The sheriff's pistol flew from his hand, landed in the snow. Duke stood over him, teeth bared, growl like rolling thunder. Duke, hold, Nate ordered. The dog froze. Didn't back off, just held position, teeth an inch from Hackett's throat. Nate walked over, kept the rifle trained. Call off your men, now! Hackett's face was purple with rage and fear. You can't, you don't know what you're doing. Call them off, or I let the dog work. He's trained to go for the throat. 5 seconds is all it takes. Hackett grabbed his radio with shaking hands. All units fall back. I repeat, fall back to the vehicles. Tell them to leave. All of them. Back to town. You're signing your death warrant. Tell them. Hackett keyed the radio again. Return to town.
Situation under control. Out.
Nate waited. Listened. After a long moment, he heard engines starting, the ATVs pulling back, headlights retreating through the trees. When the sound faded completely, Nate zip-tied Hackett's hands behind his back with restraints from the sheriff's own belt. Checked him for other weapons, found 2 knives, another pistol, a canister of pepper spray. Took it all. Duke, release. The dog backed up, but stayed alert. Nate looked at Hackett. You're going to walk. North. Don't stop. Don't look back. When you get back to town, you're going to tell Judge Blackwell it's over. Tell him the FBI has everything. Tell him to run if he wants, but it won't matter. They'll find him. They'll kill you, Hackett said. You don't know who you're messing with. This goes higher than you think. I don't care how high it goes. I care about getting Ivy Callahan somewhere safe. Everything else is someone else's problem. He cut Hackett loose, kept the rifle trained. Walk. Hackett walked. Nate watched until the darkness swallowed him, then turned and ran back to the hut. Ivy was where he'd left her pistol raised with shaking hands pointed at the door. When she saw it was him, she lowered it. Did you? He's gone. They're all gone. For now. For now. They'll be back. With more people. We need to move. Nate, I can't. You can. He pulled her up, wrapped the bivvy sack around her shoulders like a cloak. 6 more miles. We can do 6 more miles. I can't feel my feet. That's okay. I can't feel mine either. We'll be numb together. Despite everything, she almost smiled. They left the hut. Duke ranged ahead, limping badly now, his old injury aggravated past the point of ignoring. But he didn't stop, didn't slow. Nate checked his watch. 1:47 a.m. Storm was supposed to break around 6. 5 hours. They just had to survive 5 more hours. The forest opened up ahead. Through the falling snow, Nate saw lights, not headlights. Building lights, steady and yellow and beautiful. Frozen Creek Ranger Station, less than a mile away. They'd made it. The station was larger than Nate expected. 2 stories, log construction solar panels on the roof antenna tower. Government maintained, which meant codes and standards and redundancy, which meant radio equipment that might actually work. The front door was locked. Nate kicked it in. Alarm started wailing, but he didn't care. Let it wail. Let someone come investigate. Inside was warm. Heat, actual heat from a system that still worked. Ivy collapsed on the floor, sobbing with relief. Nate found the radio room. Banks of equipment, most of it old but functional. He grabbed the handset for the main transmitter, keyed it.
This is Nathaniel Cordell calling any federal authority. I have a witness to a criminal conspiracy involving local law enforcement. We need immediate assistance. Absaroka Range, Frozen Creek Station. Please respond. Static. He tried again.
Same message, same static. 3rd time, 4th. His voice was getting hoarse, then crackling through the speakers. This is Agent Dutch Calloway, FBI, Denver. Nathaniel Cordell, do you copy? Nate's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the handset. I copy. We need help. We're being hunted. Sit tight, Mr. Cordell. We've been looking for you. Chopper is airborne ETA 40 minutes.
You're at Frozen Creek Station. Yes. How did you? Garrett Sullivan contacted us 6 months ago. He was wearing a wire when he died. We have recordings. We've been building a case. You just accelerated our timeline. Nate felt his knees give out. He sank into the chair. Ivy Callahan is with me. She has the evidence. USB drive documents everything. Outstanding. Hold your position. Do not engage hostiles. We're coming to you. The transmission cut off. Nate sat there, handset still pressed to his ear, barely breathing. Duke padded over, nosed his hand. Nate dropped the handset, hugged the dog. The dog who'd saved his life. The dog who'd saved Ivy's life. The dog who'd never quit, not once through everything. Good boy. Nate whispered into the dog's fur. Good boy, Duke. A crash from upstairs. Nate grabbed the pistol, moved to the stairs. Someone was up there. He took them 2 at a time, ignoring the screaming pain in his leg. Found the room. Office. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the snow outside, was Judge Raymond Blackwell, 70 years old, white hair, expensive coat, holding an axe, and at his feet, the station's satellite phone, smashed to pieces. You should have taken the money, Blackwell said calmly. The judge was not alone. 3 men stepped from the shadows. Contractors, the kind who got paid to make problems disappear. Body armor under winter gear. Professional weapons. Cold eyes. Nate raised the Glock. Blackwell smiled. You have 15 rounds. They have 90.
Math doesn't work out for you, son.
FBI is 40 minutes out.
I know, which is why we're leaving. And you're not.
The first contractor moved. Nate fired. Hit center mass. The man staggered, but didn't drop. Body armor. Nate fired again, adjusted headshot. The contractor went down. The other 2 opened up. Nate dove behind a desk. Rounds punched through wood, through drywall, through everything. Duke was barking, snarling. Nate heard the dog attack, heard a man scream. Nate rolled, came up shooting, caught the second contractor in the leg, then the chest when he fell. The man dropped. Third contractor grabbed Duke by the collar, threw him against the wall. The dog yelped, went down hard. Rage, pure white-hot rage, flooded through Nate. He stepped into the open, fired 3 times. The contractor's head snapped back. He collapsed. Silence, ringing ears, smoke from the guns. Blackwell stood by the window, hands raised. You wouldn't shoot an unarmed man. Nate's pistol was trained on the judge's chest, finger on the trigger, pressure increasing. You left her to die, Nate said quietly. You killed Garrett. You stole from 19 families. I deserve a trial, due process. You're a veteran. You believe in the law. You are the law. You corrupted it. Then prove it, in court, like civilized people. Nate's finger trembled on the trigger. Duke whimpered from where he'd fallen. The sound cut through the rage like a blade. Nate lowered the pistol. Get on the floor. Hands behind your head. Blackwell complied. Nate zip-tied him, checked on Duke. The dog was alive, ribs bruised but nothing broken. He licked Nate's face. Downstairs, Ivy was safe. Outside, the storm was breaking, first light showing through the clouds. And in the distance, the sound of helicopter rotors. The FBI had arrived. Agent Dutch Calloway was former Marine. Nate could tell immediately from the way he moved, the way he assessed the scene, the way he didn't waste words. 52, greying hair, linebacker build. He stepped off the Black Hawk with 12 agents behind him, all business. Nathaniel Cordell. Calloway extended his hand. Nate. They shook. Firm grip, respectful. Hell of a night you've had, Calloway said, looking around at the carnage in the ranger station. 3 bodies. Judge Blackwell zip-tied on the floor, blood on the walls. Is the woman safe? Downstairs. Ivy Callahan. She has the evidence. We'll get her statement. You good to talk? Yeah. They sat in the office while EMTs tended to Ivy and Duke downstairs. Nate gave his account. Everything. The hanging, the cabin, the evidence, the chase through the storm, the shootout. Calloway listened without interrupting. Took notes. When Nate finished, the agent nodded.
Garrett Sullivan contacted me personally 8 months ago, Calloway said. He'd met Ivy Callahan, heard what she was investigating. Garrett was smart. He knew Hackett and Blackwell were dangerous, so he came to us. We wired him up, had him get close to the conspiracy, gather evidence. How close? Close enough to get killed. Calloway's jaw tightened. We didn't move fast enough. Garrett's car accident wasn't an accident. We found evidence of brake line tampering, but we couldn't prove who did it. Then you showed up, inherited the cabin. We'd been monitoring the property, waiting to see what would happen.
You knew I was coming. We knew someone would eventually. The will was flagged in our system. When the lawyer executed it, we got an alert. But by the time we mobilized, the storm hit. Roads closed. We couldn't get to you. So you waited. We sent the chopper as soon as weather cleared. Heard your radio call. You did good, Nate. Kept her alive. Got the evidence.
Gave us everything we need to bring them all down. Hackett got away. We picked him up an hour ago. Highway Patrol found him walking on Route 14, hypothermic, babbling about FBI. He's in custody, along with 6 of his men. Nate felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe. Or just exhaustion. What happens now? You go to the hospital. Get checked out. Warm up. Rest. We'll need full statements from you and Ms. Callahan, but that can wait a day or two. After that... Calloway shrugged. After that, you're free to go. You're not charged with anything. Everything you did was self-defense. I killed 3 men. You killed 3 contractors attempting to murder a federal witness. That's textbook self-defense. Don't lose sleep over it. Easier said than done. But Nate nodded. Downstairs, they were loading Ivy into a helicopter. She looked small on the stretcher, wrapped in thermal blankets, a V in her arm. But alive. Alert. She saw Nate reached out her hand.
He took it. You did it. It's over.
We did it, she corrected. Her voice was still hoarse but stronger. Thank you, Nate. Thank Garrett. This was his plan all along. Tears streamed down her face. I know. They loaded her into the bird. A vet was examining Duke, the same military vet who'd treated working dogs in Afghanistan. He looked up at Nate. Your dog's tough. Bruised ribs aggravated the old shrapnel wound in his leg. But he'll heal. Might need surgery to remove the shrapnel fully. Do it. Whatever he needs. He's a good dog. Saved your life, sounds like. More than once. The vet smiled. Best kind. 3 months later, on a Saturday in May, Nate stood in front of Frozen Creek Ranger Station with a dedication plaque in his hands. The building had been repaired, walls, patched floors cleaned. No trace of the violence that had happened here, except for the memorial. Black granite mounted on the wall beside the main entrance, polished smooth. Engraved with simple words, in memory of Sergeant Garrett Sullivan, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 1989-2025. He gave everything so others could be free. Beneath that, a second line, and in honor of all who serve. Nate mounted the plaque himself, using the drill and screws the ranger station superintendent had provided. His hands were steady. The work felt right. When he stepped back, Agent Calloway was there. The FBI agent had driven up from Denver for the ceremony. Looks good, Calloway said. He deserved more. He got more. 19 families have their land back. 12 million in restitution distributed. Hackett's doing 40 years. Blackwell got 35. 8 others are in federal prison. That's Garrett's legacy. Nate nodded. Looked at the plaque. At Garrett's name carved in stone. He saved my life in Kandahar, Nate said quietly. I was the medic, but he's the one who dragged me behind cover when the IED went off. Took shrapnel meant for me. I'd forgotten that until I was going through his things. Found his journal. He wrote about it. You were, even then. No. I owed him. Still do. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Calloway checked his watch. Ceremony starts in an hour. You ready? Ready. Sullivan's Haven dedication ceremony drew a crowd. 19 families who'd gotten their land back. Veterans from across Wyoming who'd heard about the free shelter. Media. State officials. And Beth Henriksen, the first woman Ivy had helped, who'd baked 5 pies for the occasion. The cabin had been transformed. Insurance money and donations had funded a complete rebuild. 8 bedrooms now. Industrial kitchen. Common area with a stone fireplace big enough to warm 20 people. Solar panels on the roof. A garden plot that Ivy was planning to plant. Ivy stood beside Nate as he cut the ribbon. She'd recovered fully from the hypothermia and the ordeal, physically at least. The nightmares still came sometimes, but she was working through them. Had started seeing a therapist. Was rebuilding. Garrett would be proud, she said as the ribbon fell. Yeah, he would. The first guests arrived within an hour. Marcus Webb, 52 Army Infantry Iraq veteran, living in his car for 3 years. He pulled up in a Toyota Corolla, held together with duct tape and hope. Nate walked down to greet him, extended his hand. Marcus Webb. Yeah, how'd you... You called yesterday, said you'd be here today. I remember. Marcus's eyes were red. I didn't know if... You're home now. Come on, we've got a room ready for you. Dinner's at 6. Spaghetti tonight. Marcus started crying. Just stood there in the driveway and cried. Nate put a hand on his shoulder. Waited. Let him get it out. Duke padded over, sat beside Marcus, leaned against his leg. The contact seemed to steady the man. He wiped his eyes. Sorry. It's been a long time since anyone... I know. Come inside when you're ready. By evening, 7 veterans were staying at the Haven, ages ranging from 28 to 63. Branches including Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, wars from Vietnam to Afghanistan. They didn't talk about combat. That was an unwritten rule. You could if you wanted, but nobody pushed. Instead, they talked about normal things: rebuilding the deck, the garden, whether the Broncos would finally get their act together. After dinner, Nate stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the Absaroka Range in gold and purple. Duke lay beside him, scar on his side, hidden under fur. The dog had recovered fully from surgery. The old shrapnel was gone. The limp would never completely disappear, but it didn't seem to bother him. Ivy came out, handed him coffee. 7 guests on opening day, she said. Not bad. It's a start. You should sleep. You've been up since 4 a.m. Can't. Too wired. PTSD. Nah, just thinking. About how 3 months ago I was living in a trailer, broke alone, wondering what the point was. And now... He gestured at the cabin, the lights in the windows, the sound of Marcus and another vet talking quietly inside. Now I've got a purpose again. Ivy sat beside him. Garrett knew what he was doing when he left you this place. He left me more than a place. He left me a mission. They sat in comfortable silence. Duke's tail thumped once against the porch. A shooting star streaked across the sky. Make a wish, Ivy said. Nate closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was smiling. Don't need to. Already got everything I need. Inside, someone laughed. A real laugh, not the hollow kind. The sound of healing starting slow but sure. Duke stood, stretched, limped to the door. Nate opened it for him. The dog went inside to make his rounds, checking on each person, making sure everyone was safe. Old habits. Good habits. Nate looked up at the stars, thought about Garrett. About all the things he'd never get to say to the man who'd saved him twice, once in Kandahar, once in death. Thank you, brother, he said quietly to the night. Mission accomplished. The wind carried his words up into the mountains, into the darkness, into whatever came after. And somewhere maybe Garrett heard them. Dedicated to Sergeant Garrett Sullivan and all military working dogs who serve alongside their handlers. 22 veterans die by suicide each day in America. If you or someone you know needs help, Veterans Crisis Line, dial 988, press 1. This story honors those who serve, those who sacrifice, and those who never stop searching for home.